In just 46 seconds, one of Britain's most beloved comedy legends completely destroyed a morning television host's reputation on live TV. What started as a simple conversation about artistic freedom turned into an absolute meltdown that exposed everything wrong with modern celebrity journalism. The cameras captured every single moment as Rowan Atkinson tore apart Lorraine Kelly's carefully constructed image, leading to one of the most dramatic walk-offs in British television history. Before we dive into this explosive story, make sure you subscribe to this channel for daily videos exposing Britain's darkest scandals. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the drama. Last night's episode of Lorraine was supposed to be a light-hearted chat about Rowan Atkinson's career and his thoughts on comedy in today's world. The legendary actor, known for staying out of controversy and keeping his private life extremely private, had agreed to appear on the show to discuss his work in theater. What nobody expected was that Lorraine Kelly would turn this into an ambush that would backfire spectacularly. The show started normally enough. Rowan walked onto the set with his usual modest demeanor, giving a polite wave to the studio audience. He sat down across from Lorraine, who was wearing her trademark bright smile. The first few minutes were pleasant. They talked about his early days in comedy, his university years at Oxford, and how he developed his physical comedy style. Rowan spoke carefully and thoughtfully, the way he always does in interviews. He's never been someone who craves the spotlight, preferring to let his work speak for itself. But then Lorraine shifted gears. Her tone changed. Her smile became sharper, more calculated. She leaned forward with a piece of paper in her hand, and you could see Rowan's expression shift slightly. He sensed something was coming. "Now, Rowan," Lorraine said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I want to talk about some comments you made a few years ago about cancel culture and freedom of speech. You've been quite vocal about comedians needing to push boundaries, haven't you?" Rowan nodded slowly. "Yes. I've always believed that comedy should be allowed to explore difficult subjects. That's how we process complex ideas as a society." Lorraine jumped on this immediately. "But don't you think that's a bit insensitive? I mean, we live in a time where people are finally being heard. Marginalized communities are speaking up about what hurts them, and here you are, a wealthy white man, saying comedians should be able to say whatever they want." The studio went quiet. This wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Rowan's face remained calm, but his eyes showed surprise at the sudden attack. "That's not quite what I said, Lorraine," he replied carefully. "What I've always argued for is the right of artists to take creative risks without fear of being silenced. That includes listening to criticism and growing from it, but not being destroyed for making mistakes." Lorraine wasn't having it. She cut him off before he could finish his thought. "But isn't that just privilege talking? You've made millions from playing characters that some people find offensive. Mr. Bean does things that mock disabled people. Johnny English makes fun of different cultures. And now you're sitting here defending your right to keep doing it." This was a complete misrepresentation of his work and everyone watching could see it. Rowan's jaw tightened. He took a breath before responding. "Lorraine, I think you're deliberately misunderstanding both my work and my position. Mr. Bean is a character who struggles with everyday life. He's not mocking anyone except perhaps the absurdity of social conventions. And I've never defended the right to be cruel or punch down at vulnerable people. What I defend is artistic freedom to explore human nature in all its complexity." But Lorraine was on a roll now, clearly reading from notes that her producers had prepared. This had been planned. This was an ambush designed to create a viral moment. And she wasn't going to let facts get in the way. "I have some tweets here," she said, pulling out her phone. "From people who say they were hurt by your comedy. One person says watching Mr. Bean made them feel like their learning disability was being mocked. Another says, your comments about free speech made them feel unsafe. How do you respond to that?" Rowan sat back in his chair. You could see the moment he realized what was happening. This wasn't an interview. This was a trial with Lorraine playing judge, jury, and executioner. His voice became colder, more precise. "First of all, I'm sorry if anyone felt hurt by my work. That's never the intention. But Lorraine, you're taking individual responses and trying to build a case that my entire career has been harmful. That's not journalism. That's character assassination." The audience stirred. Some people gasped. Lorraine's face flushed red. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not on her own show. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice had an edge to it now. Character assassination. That's a bit dramatic, isn't it? I'm just asking questions that people want answered. No, Rowan said firmly. You're asking loaded questions designed to make me look like a villain. There's a difference between holding someone accountable and publicly shaming them for entertainment. Lorraine's mask was slipping now. The friendly morning show host persona was cracking, revealing something uglier underneath. She leaned forward aggressively. I think what people really want to know is why you're so defensive about this. If you truly cared about not hurting people, wouldn't you just apologize and move on? Apologize for what exactly? Rowan's voice was steady, but his anger was building. For creating comedy that millions of people around the world have enjoyed, for defending the principle that artists should be allowed to take risks, for refusing to pretend that complex issues have simple answers, for being part of the problem, Lorraine snapped, her professional veneer completely gone now. For using your platform to defend comedians who say horrible things, for acting like freedom of speech is more important than people's feelings. The studio went silent. This had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Rowan stared at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was ice cold. People's feelings are important, Lorraine. But you know what else is important? Truth, nuance, the ability to have difficult conversations without resorting to moral grandstanding. And right now, what you're doing isn't journalism. It's bullying. Lorraine's eyes widened. How dare you? I'm trying to give voice to people who've been hurt. No, you're not, Rowan said, his voice rising for the first time. You're using other people's pain as a weapon to attack someone who won't give you the soundbite you want. You brought me on this show under false pretenses, ambushed me with out-of-context quotes, and twisted my words to fit your narrative. This isn't about protecting anyone. This is about ratings. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Lorraine looked genuinely shocked that someone had called her out so directly. She tried to recover, but her voice was shaking. Now look incredibly unfair. I'm just doing my job. Your job is to ambush guests, Rowan asked. Your job is to create controversy where none exists. Your job is to take a nuanced position about artistic freedom and turn it into some kind of confession of guilt. Lorraine's face was bright red now. She looked at her producers off camera, clearly hoping for help, but they were frozen. This was going out live, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. I think maybe you should calm down, Lorraine said, trying to regain control of the situation. You're getting very emotional about this. That was her biggest mistake. Telling someone they're too emotional when they're making a valid point is a classic manipulation tactic. And Rowan saw right through it. I'm not emotional, Lorraine. I'm angry, and I have every right to be. You invited me here to talk about theater and instead turned this into some kind of public shaming ritual. You've misrepresented my work, twisted my words, and tried to paint me as someone who doesn't care about people's feelings. All for what? So you can get some clips for social media, so you can feel morally superior. Lorraine tried to interrupt, but Rowan kept going, his voice growing stronger. Do you know what the real problem is? It's not comedians trying to explore difficult subjects. It's people like you who profit from creating division. You don't want understanding or dialogue. You want conflict because conflict gets views. You want villains because villains make good television. Well, I'm not going to be your villain today. Now, hang on just a minute. Lorraine's voice was shrill now. All pretense of professionalism gone. You don't get to come on my show and accuse me of being some kind of manipulator. I've been doing this for decades and clearly you've learned nothing. Rowan shot back. Decades of experience and you still think ambushing guests is acceptable behavior. You still think you can twist someone's words and face no consequences? The audience was completely silent now. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were filming on their phones, knowing they were witnessing something historic. This wasn't just a disagreement. This was a complete breakdown of the usual celebrity interview dynamic. Lorraine stood up suddenly, pointing her finger at Rowan. I think you need to leave. This is my show and I won't be spoken to like this. Rowan stood up too, but he was calm now, eerily calm. He looked directly into the camera, speaking to the viewers at home rather than to Lorraine. I came here in good faith to have a conversation. Instead, I was ambushed and attacked for defending basic principles of artistic freedom. This is what passes for journalism now. This is what morning television has become. A circus designed to humiliate people for entertainment. Get off my show, Lorraine screamed, completely losing control now. Security, get him out of here. But Rowan wasn't finished. He turned back to face her. And his voice was quiet but devastating. You know what the saddest part is, Lorraine, you actually had an opportunity here. You could have had a real conversation about comedy, about freedom of speech, about how we balance artistic expression with sensitivity. Instead, you chose to create drama. You chose to attack rather than understand. And in doing so, you've proven exactly why these conversations are so difficult to have. Because people like you don't want conversations. You want confessions. Lorraine's face was purple now. She was shaking with rage, unable to form coherent words. She just kept pointing at the exit, her arm trembling. Rowan unclipped his microphone and placed it carefully on the chair. He looked at Lorraine one last time, and there was something like pity in his eyes. I hope whatever ratings boost you get from this was worth it, he said quietly. Because you've just shown everyone exactly who you really are. He turned and walked toward the exit. The studio was absolutely silent, except for the sound of his footsteps. Lorraine stood there frozen, clearly not knowing what to do. Her producers were frantically talking into their headsets, but it was too late. The damage was done. As Rowan reached the door, one audience member started clapping. Then another, then another. Within seconds, half the audience was applauding as he left the stage. Lorraine looked around in horror, realizing that she'd lost control of her own show. People were cheering for the guest she'd tried to humiliate. Shut up! She yelled at the audience. This is my show. Sit down. But they didn't sit down. More people stood up, applauding louder. Some were even cheering. Lorraine looked like she was going to cry or scream or both. She grabbed her notes and threw them on the floor in frustration. Fine, fine. We're going to commercial. Everyone just shut the hell up. The cameras kept rolling for a few more seconds, capturing her complete meltdown before finally cutting away. But it was too late. The whole thing had been broadcast live. Millions of people had watched Lorraine Kelly try to ambush one of Britain's most respected actors and get completely destroyed in the process. Rowan Atkinson walked out of that studio with his dignity intact and his reputation enhanced. He'd stood up for himself, called out manipulative journalism, and exposed the ugly reality of modern celebrity media. He hadn't raised his voice unnecessarily, hadn't been cruel, but he'd been absolutely devastating in his honesty. Lorraine Kelly, on the other hand, had shown her true colors. The friendly morning show host persona had shattered, revealing someone who was willing to ambush guests, twist their words, and create conflict for ratings. Someone who couldn't handle being challenged, and fell apart when her tactics were exposed. As Rowan reached his car outside the studio, he didn't look back. He'd said everything that needed to be said. He got in, closed the door, and drove away from what would become one of the most talked about moments in British television.